I'll turn my camera on here. Hi everyone. I'm Will Devlin, and Jeff Haws, my colleague, will be joining us here in just a second on cam. There he is. Hey Jeff, how are you? So we're going to be talking and showcasing some fresh research that will be formally published next month by MessageGears that highlights how confused marketers are about CDPs and what that means for you. So again, my name here is Will Devlin. This is Jeff Haws. We're going to hit some of the highlights from the research, and then throughout we're going to pause a little bit because Jeff has taken a deeper dive into some of the research. He's sliced and diced the data in different ways to get a better understanding and uncover any interesting insights. And so I want to make sure that we uncover some of the things that he's been able to see in the research itself. Why do we do this, and who do we talk to? So we're a MarTech provider, and as hopefully most of you know. But look, we get asked by our customers about CDPs all the time, and also as marketers in the technology space, we need to have a good understanding of the tools that our customers are using and how they fit into the larger stack. And so for a while now, it's felt like we've been fielding questions about CDPs. There's certainly been a lot of buzz around it. It's also felt like there's been an open secret that the CDP landscape is confusing and messy and fairly poorly defined. And so at the same time that's going on, marketers also seem to be feeling like they have to have one. So we set out to see if we could capture some of that versus relying on what could have been anecdotal evidence. So we work with our research partners at Pure Spectrum and TGPR, and we asked marketers about CDPs, and we limited it to what you see on the screen here, which is individuals that work in marketing or at an agency in a B2C capacity, at least half the time, manager level and above. We wanted to talk to people that were likely using and influencing the purchasing decision around marketing technology. We at MessageGears deal with what we term super senders, which is large B2C consumer-facing brands, and so we wanted to survey that particular group for a better understanding. So we're looking at B2C marketers that send at least 1 million email and mobile messages a month. And one of the other requirements is that there needed to be some level of familiarity with CDPs, as in at least you've heard of the term. And so we didn't want to skew any of the data otherwise. So I think we're going to start. There's a few pieces of interaction that we're going to have here. We're going to start with a poll, and I'm going to put this up here for just a minute or two, but wanting to get a sense of who's here. Does your organization currently use a CDP? And it's a yes or no question. We'll get this started, and then we'll kind of dive into the research. So we'll have this live. If you're here and you're willing to share, please just click yes or no now, and we'll share the data here in just a second. Almost everybody's voted. We'll give it another second here. All right, any last requests for this poll? Here we go. I'm going to close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this was really interesting. Looking at our results here, most of you on this call do not work in an organization that currently uses a CDP. So this is really interesting, and I guess is part of the reason you're here. So as we go back into the research itself, these were some of the questions early on that we asked around CDP confusion. Now, of the people that we asked, 94% of them use a CDP. So different than this audience here at large. The vast majority of them already using the CDP. The familiarity question that I mentioned, the vast majority here were very familiar, have worked with a CDP for years, and just a few that conceptually knew of a CDP but hasn't worked with one. So the audience that we surveyed here, much different than the audience in attendance. We asked this group what the primary purpose of a CDP was. The clear winner here was to manage customer marketing activities. Over half had that as their response. But to keep track of customer information was 22%, and about 18% to predict the next optimum customer move. Those are very different things, and we'll get into that in a minute, because the expectations around each of those things, if you're saying this is the primary purpose of my CDP, the expectations are much different. The primary business value of a CDP, again, a fairly clear primary business value winner here, and to help a customer or a company increase customer satisfaction, which I think ties right into the customer customer experience and being able to deliver a great customer experience. But you see a good variety of in second place there, and said help a company increase revenue per customer, increase its customer base, and increase retention, and all are somewhat tied together. So I wouldn't, this isn't as contradictory, if you will. And then the primary drawback, more even answers here, but most of the drawbacks to CDPs: too expensive to buy, build, or maintain, lack of integrations to other systems, and then the data is incomplete or inaccurate. So I'm going to pause there, and let's talk a little bit, Jeff, about what we're seeing there. So quickly, just to recap, lots of people that we surveyed familiar already with CDPs and already using CDPs. What we saw was that there's some variety in how people answered the primary purpose of a CDP, the business value of the CDP, and the drawbacks to them. But there was some commonality in saying, essentially, people said CDP is primarily used to manage customer marketing activities, and that they're helping increase customer satisfaction. You dug a little bit deeper, though, into the data. Is one of the things you were talking about when we were prepping for this is some of the market confusion could perhaps be around people that maybe aren't as familiar or experienced with CDPs, and so you took a look at that cohort. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you found in that?
Yeah, I thought one of the things I wanted to do in digging deeper into the data was try to get an idea of kind of poking and prodding at this idea where we're going to CDP confusion. Why is there CDP confusion? Everybody seems to think there is, pretty much, to whatever extent, but why? Like, where is that coming from? And one of the things I was looking at was based upon the level of familiarity that people have with the CDP, and looking at kind of the answers they gave, and where did that kind of break. And what we ended up seeing was, the people who talked about managing customer marketing activities was the most important purpose of a CDP. 83% of those who were very familiar gave that answer, and only 36% of people who weren't very familiar with CDP gave that answer. That's a huge gap. It's more than 2 times as likely to say customer marketing activities if you're very familiar than if you're not. And then you saw things like, 82% of those who were very familiar with CDPs said companies should expect to spend more than $200,000 on a CDP, but only 53% of the rest. And you saw these answers breaking down a lot of these questions when you started digging in deeper. Start seeing the familiar people, the people who knew more about a CDP, were comfortable with it, who used it for years. They would give one answer almost in lockstep, and then the other people would kind of spread out among the other answers, which starts to make you think, like, how much of this confusion is being driven by a lot of companies diving into CDPs, and a lot of people maybe not being as familiar with them, but their company just kind of got one.
So that makes sense, right, on its face, right? If you've used a CDP, you understand more clearly what to expect that out of your CDP, and how much money you should allocate towards it, and in theory the return on investment. We'll get into some of that data in a second. But there's a lot of folks, as we've seen here even today, that aren't as familiar, and so yeah, there may be a little bit of a just a chicken or an egg thing of people that are very familiar with it, making sure that they are able to communicate. This is what a CD, and this could follow a traditional curve for any new market entrant or new category maybe. So are the importance of a CDP, was there any correlation to familiarity there as well? Like, does the people that are more or less familiar with a CDP, how does that affect their value of how important it is within the org?
Yeah, you mentioned the chicken or the egg, and really, one of the interesting things I thought was that 2/3 of people who were very familiar with CDPs also said they were very important, and less than half of everybody else said that. Also, 2/3 of people who were very familiar said that they would definitely invest in a CDP if they were the decision maker, and only 31% of everybody else, so again, more than 2 times as likely, who say they would definitely invest in a CDP. And that's where the chicken or the egg thing comes in. I think it's interesting because it's like, are those people, the familiar people, the people who have used the CDP for years, they know what they're doing with it, and maybe their job might be tied to it to a certain extent. These people are using it on a day-to-day basis. They've used it for years. Are they saying it's more important and that they would definitely invest in it because it's what they do and they want to kind of support their own job? I want to stay employed, so yeah, I'd bring in a CDP. This is what I do. Or are they using the CDP and that is kind of convincing them of its importance, and that they like, I wonder which kind of, is the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog there? And I don't know the answer. And I think, one of the things we were talking about earlier is like, we don't know the answer to a lot of these questions. I think they're interesting, and the research can kind of bring them up. But I think they're interesting to talk about because I think they start to try to get at the root of what is going on here and why is there confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. All right, let's move on. We have another poll to keep you guys on your toes. Just based on what you know about a CDP. So it's very clear that most of our audience is here to learn and probably has some surface level knowledge. But based on what you know, where would a CDP help the most? And so I'm gonna launch this poll here. Give it your best guess. Based on what you know about CDPs right now, where would it be most impactful? Which channel, if you will, would you expect this to work out best in? So we'll give everybody about 30 seconds to throw their vote in. We're getting there. Give you about 10 more seconds. Anybody that hasn't voted in this one? Didn't know there would be work involved, did you? All right, we're gonna close it out. All right, thank you all for participating. So here's another, really interesting. The vast majority here, email, 60%. Yeah, CDP will help in the email channel the most, but we see paid ads and website. We didn't have a single person vote for mobile or social channels in this audience. So very interesting, very enlightening. So let's take a look at
the webinar. That may have been, the email part may have been a little self-selected.
Maybe. That's a good point. So we asked the audience we surveyed how important a CDP is relative to other systems, and this kind of goes back to the familiarity thing that Jeff was just covering. 61% said it's very important. In fact, it's an important tool according to every marketer that we surveyed, except for 1.5%, right? So so certainly very important or somewhat important is an understatement. This was, to me, my favorite outcome of the research, just highlighting the confusion. We asked, pick out of these features what are the most important in a CDP and what are the least important in the CDP. And I know this is a little bit of an eye test, but it is really indicative that you were asked, or our audience was asked to choose 3, and there's a lot of even answers, particularly on what's least important, and so there's not a ton of consensus, if you will, on these are the top 3 things that my CDP should do. And so to me, this is just very telling in, look, people are, what a CDP means to them is different than what a CDP means to their counterpart in a different company. And so you see various things. One of the biggest things of importance here, making customer data available for immediate use across marketing channels. Other ones that were a little bit higher up the list here, consolidates various types of data like transactional and event data, and utilizes your data where it lives instead of storing it themselves. We'll come back to that in a minute. And then on the least important, identity resolution, which there are some CDPs or companies that define themselves that way, that's one of their main features, but it's marked as least important among this audience. And then a lot of commonality around visualization of customer data, directly connecting to your ESP. There's some things like that that are voted as least important here. We'll come back to this talking point in a second, but this audience said email was most important. Where CDP helps the most among the audience we surveyed was the website, although there again was some email was number 2, social was number 3, paid ads, mobile, and offline. In theory, a CDP is able to help all of these channels and help you be able to work in concert among all of them. All right, so we'll take another quick pause and dive deeper into a little bit here, but there's a wide distribution of answers when it comes to the most important, least important features. And CDPs are so many different things to different people. So Jeff, how does a company that has a CDP or is a CDP provider keep up with that?
Yeah, I definitely wonder, looking at that data, are CDPs, do they even know what a CDP is? Like, are they trying to hit a moving target? How do you satisfy that kind of market where people have these wide-reaching ideas of what you're going to do? I think CDPs kind of may perpetuate that a little bit of, they're kind of magic. They're the magic marketing tool. We can do anything with your data, and this one's going to do some things, and that one's going to do others. And you go to a place like the CDP Institute, and they're going to break down, and they're going to tell you all these different types of CDPs, and this one does these things, and these specialize in that. Hard to even know what you're buying at times. When you look deeper in the data, so 2/3 of organizations that sent more than 50 million emails, they said the primary purpose of CDP was to manage customer marketing activities, and 47% of other companies said that. So when you start looking at larger companies, bigger companies, and maybe the more likely to have spent on a CDP, they were more likely to have kind of driven the answer that did kind of win there. They kind of drove that a little bit. And 21% of organizations that sent less than 10 million emails, they said a CDP's primary business value was helping a company reduce costs. And only 6% of other companies said that. That may make sense too. Smaller companies, they're very conscious. They're looking to do that kind of thing and try to cut revenue or cut expenses and increase revenue. So that may make sense. Some of this is probably intuitive, but one of the things I like from that data before is the customer marketing activity, the one that got 43% and one on the side of what is the most important, also got 20% on the least important. And so you like, see, even the one that really was pretty head and shoulders out in front of everything on the most important, still right in the middle of the pack on least important. And what does that tell you?
Fascinating. I love that. I know we'll be diving deeper to that when the research is published, but I think that one's to me. All right, we have a final poll question here for the audience. This one should, if you're here, maybe is a little bit telling, but I'm going to launch it, which is, do you believe there is confusion in the marketplace about CDPs? We'll give everybody, about 30 seconds or so, and we'll talk about it.
It'd be pretty amazing if we got like a whole lot of no. That would be unexpected.
I would be surprised with this group, but I don't want to skew the answers, Jeff.
This is a very scientific poll, so I don't want to.
It's very scientific. We're almost there with the majority of people. We'll give everybody a couple more seconds if you haven't voted, and then we'll go to the last bit of research here. All right, not surprising on this one. The vast majority here said, yeah, there's definitely confusion. That's why I'm here. Moron, why'd you ask? But yeah, 94% of you do believe that there's confusion, we asked our audience the same thing, so we'll get into that here. Do you believe there's confusion in the marketplace about CDPs? Now, we didn't give you guys an I'm not sure answer, but to me that is a yes. If you're not sure, I kind of feel like that's a yes.
Whether I'm confused.
Yeah, that's an interesting read there. But our audience said the same thing, and interesting again that these are people that are familiar with CDPs, and most of them use a CDP. The vast majority of them, they're saying, yeah, the market is confused about CDPs. Where they put that blame was the next question, and the top two answers here were because vendors have done a poor job explaining what it is and why it's needed, and because many companies believe that they already have a solution that fits this need. So these are really interesting answers because it kind of puts it's the shared blame on the vendor landscape, and sort of this wild west of, okay, we're doing something with customer data and helping marketers use it. We're going to call ourselves a CDP. And again, there's different things that different CDPs focus on helping with. But then it's also putting a little bit of the blame and the onus on the customers and the companies themselves, and saying, like, we either already think you've got something in place there, or may even be confused about what you're needing and what you're looking for. But then we asked some other questions about, look, if the final decision was yours, would your company invest or continue to invest in CDPs? And this skewed extremely heavily toward, yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, no question, which I really found, I found interesting, right? We just said that, look, there's a lot of market confusion about this. The vendors make it confusing. The companies don't necessarily know what they want, or don't have a clear idea of why you would need one. Yeah, we would totally invest though, and 100%. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. When we asked about the budget question here, how much would you spend? The majority here, looking somewhere between 200,000, 500,000 annually on software here, and kind of skews higher or lower depending on the size of the company. But this was then an interesting follow-up question: how quickly can a user expect to achieve a positive ROI on for a CDP? And really, it's less than 6 months is really the biggest answer here. So we're spending a lot of money on CDPs and technology here, in spite of the confusion in the marketplace. But then we're saying, I expect to receive a payback on that very quickly, within 6 months, which is really, again, quite interesting. So on this final section here, look, people believe there's confusion, and they're again putting blame on both the vendors themselves for not making it clear enough, although that might not be in the vendor's best interest to make it clear enough, honestly. And then for companies, for not being clear about why they need one. However, they're then saying, we definitely need a CDP. I would continue to invest a lot of money, and I expect positive ROI in 6 months or less. So there's some seemingly conflicting things happening there. Most glaring to me being that there's confusion because companies don't quite understand how CDPs are supposed to help them or what use cases they solve for, but that they expect positive ROI. And so the marketer needs, like, how do you get positive ROI on something that you might not necessarily be clear on what it is. But when you dove into the data a little bit here, Jeff, I mean, what were you seeing in terms of how different sizes of companies answered some of these questions in different ways?
Yeah, and again, intuitive. In a lot of cases, bigger companies, 51% of companies sending 50 million plus emails, they said the primary drawback is integration. 20% of the rest. When you looked at the spending itself, 20% said of companies saying 50 million emails or more said they should spend $1 million plus on a CDP, and only 3% of everybody else said that. And I mean, that's a big gap. But 1 out of 5 companies that send 50 million emails or more talk about spending $1 million, and they're also wanting that positive ROI that everybody else is wanting.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and 62% of those sending 20 million or more said a company should spend 500,000 or more on a CDP, and only 2% of everybody else said that. So, we talk about intuitive, and we've seen it before. Like, the larger companies are willing to spend more money, but you wonder, how much is that skewing the perception of how much you spend? I did look online a little bit and try to get an idea of, like, how much do people say you should spend? And what I saw was kind of between $100,000 and $300,000 was a common number that I saw come up. In other cases, I saw people talk about kind of percentage of revenue. So they were talking about between 9 and 15% revenue. And maybe that kind of decision, that kind of spending metric is kind of coming into play with our answers we're seeing, where these large companies are looking at a percentage, and maybe at that percentage, they're willing to really put a ton of money into CDPs. It does show some confidence in what the CDPs are doing, but those are some high expectations.
And what about, is there, quickly here in a couple minutes, is there a difference between seniority level and how they answer questions?
One of the more interesting things I thought that we saw was how adamant and enthusiastic the C-suite and the higher up people were about CDPs and having them and spending on them. I saw the C-suite people. They won 83% of director VP C-suite said they're very familiar with CDPs. Less than half of managers said the same, but I would think managers would be more likely to actually use them. And so, director to some extent, VP probably less. C-suite, I wouldn't think that much. 75% of C-suite said they would definitely invest in a CDP again, and 52% of everybody else. 3/4 of the C-suite people, C-suite people were 1.5 times more likely to say they would definitely get a CDP than anybody else. And almost 20% of the C-suite said a CDP isn't very important compared to 43% of everybody else. So why are the people in the C-suite so enthusiastic about it? I wonder that. Is there a C-suite feedback loop? The CMO is talking to each other. Is there status in being like, oh yeah, we got a CDP. Yeah, oh yeah, we invested in one. Yeah, we spent $1 million. Like, is that going on? Is there a little bit of that? Whereas the people who are actually have their fingers on the keyboard and they're doing it, are they cool with CDPs, but maybe not quite as like fully into the boat and feel like, well, it helps me, but I'm more interested in how it helps me day to day.
That's great. So, and I'm getting some feedback when I talk. Sorry. Speakers are being very good. All right.
I hear you.
Are you muted, Jeff?
No, I hear you. I'm not muted.
Can you mute? I'm getting some feedback when I talk. See if that helps. We'll bring it home there. All right. All right. So let's quickly wrap up here by defining a CDP. A CDP, as defined by the Customer Data Institute, is a packaged software that creates persistent, unified customer database that's accessible to other systems. We had a couple questions come in. Ryan brought in a great point. It was less of a question and more of a statement of there's confusion between CDPs and DMPs and the difference there. And that is something we did ask in the research. So when we send the research to you, which we'll do after the fact, we'll definitely make sure that we have that for you. The best way to learn about CDPs, if you're not sure how to help, the CDP Institute, like I mentioned, Gartner or Forrester or any advisory firm, and then we'll share some resources that
we
have
recently
as well.
A podcast with David Robb from the CDP Institute talking about some of this stuff, and certainly he's a good resource to listen to.
And you might be asking, what do we do? Are we a CDP? And we have a customer marketing platform that's built around a key driver, and that's data access. So we build tools that remove data friction for marketers and let them use more of our data or their data to send better messages. Our MessageGears segment product directly connects to any modern data warehouse and allows marketers to build audiences using live data that can be activated anywhere. So that plays very well with many pure play CDPs because it gives marketers access to all of their customer data in one place for distribution. But it also means that for some use cases, it eliminates the need for a CDP at all, which effectively makes the combination of a modern data warehouse and MessageGears a CDP in itself. So MessageGears segment can solve a lot of the use cases people have for CDPs, especially around data access and distribution for a lot less money. But if you've invested in the CDP, we can make it hum. And I mentioned I promised some resources for you, so no matter which way of those things you're leading, have some additional resources. We did a webinar with our partners at Inspira on whether you should build versus buy, how to know which is best. Jeff mentioned the podcast that we did with the CDP Institute's David Robb, really insightful on understanding CDPs on our In Gear podcast. We have a white paper talking about the pitfalls of CDPs in general and why they don't solve all your problems and why you might pick the CDP. And then we have a guide and a quiz on our website that you can take, the MessageGears Data Maturity Roadmap for marketers to see where you are on the road to data maturity and where you can go to be a truly data-driven organization. So guys, that's all we have. Thank you everybody for joining and participating. Thank you, Jeff, for surfacing some additional insights. And we're going to send a copy of the published report directly to everybody here as soon as it's live. We'll send a recording along with these resources to everybody later this week. And we are here to field any additional questions you may have at marketing@messagegears.com. We hope you found this insightful and helpful, and we hope to see you on our next webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Yep.